Welcome to the International Teacher Podcast with your host, Greg, the single guy, and Matt, the family guy. We're recording episodes from around the globe to tell you about the best kept secret in education. That's right, it's teaching overseas. We're glad to have you.
Greg, the sputter guy.
Welcome to ITP, the International Teacher Podcast. This is Greg, the single guy, and I'm sitting in here with two different instances. The first part of this broadcast is going to be with Kent, the cat guy. We're sitting here at our classroom having a little lunch, right? How you doing, Kent?
Hey, I'm doing great. I got myself a sandwich, got myself a podcast. I couldn't ask for more.
I know, and believe it or not, we have a Subway in this country, and it's not bad. What did you think of the sandwich there, Ken?
Oh, I already ate my half, and it was delicious.
If we have to take a moment here in our podcast just to chew a little bit, it's just, it's one of those things. We have to work and eat at the same time.
Well, when it comes to working and eating, I'm willing to put the work aside for the eating.
Absolutely. Let's just do some eating. This isn't work anyway. This is just fun. And we're coming back off of a really heavy wait time since this last episode. I mean, what was it, November?
It's been since November. What are our faithful fans thinking? What have we been up to?
I think Matt and I agreed, and Kent agreed also. We would like to share with you our vacation stories because as an international teacher, we have so many opportunities. Some of us might go home, some of us might not go anywhere, and some of us might actually just go anywhere in the world, right? And we at different times. So each kind of vacation is a little different. The COVID has hit us a little bit differently too, but we don't even need to talk about that. We can just talk generally about travels over vacations. All right, Kent, what do you think?
I think it's fantastic.
How was your vacation? Where did you go?
I went back to the States this year.
Do you normally go back to the States, Kent,
Nope.
in the situation you're in right now?
I don't. This is the phase that I'm in right now. I'm in the phase of discovering my home country. In the previous years, I've been all over the world, from Russia to France to Italy to Czech Republic to Estonia to Finland to Sweden, all over the place. But this year, went to the United States.
I better take out a map to just start keeping track of these places. It sounds like you've been around the world. What made you choose home this year?
Well, I think you said it in the introduction. It's a COVID year. Europe was a little bit unknown for us in the wintertime. So we decided to go back to the States. We love discovering the States. I think every international teacher goes through a period where they travel the world and then get interested in their home country again. And that's exactly for us. We were celebrating our anniversary. We went to Las Vegas, where we got married so many years ago, and we went and celebrated that.
And it's just you and your wife, because you don't have kids right now.
No, we don't have kids. And we
You have
met
a cat.
We got a cat. Got a cat?
Did your cat go along?
No, my cat stayed.
Yeah,
Cat doesn't want to
Cats can just sort of stay there like they're like an app.
Yeah,
You can
cats
just
don't
sort
even
of
like
use them
Vegas.
when you want to. They don't even like you anyway. Does your cat like you?
Marginal.
I'm sorry to digress, but we had to put a little humor in, right? Okay. So you went to Vegas. You left right away when the first thing smoking after we got out for vacation.
Okay, so my hometown is Bellingham, Washington, for any Washingtonians out there. It's about a half hour south of the Canadian border from up by Vancouver on the west coast. We're in Washington State. So we spent ourselves about a week in our hometown of Bellingham.
I'm trying not to chew into the microphone while I eat my sandwich.
Great.
Go ahead.
We live next to the Bellingham Airport. I know. Now I've given you my exact location now, haven't I? We just hopped on a Southwest Airlines flight, and 3 hours later, 2.5 hours later, we're in Vegas. So very convenient and lots of fun. It will not be the last time that we do that.
I guess I should digress here for a second. Our school currently, we have Christmas vacation off like most schools in the States do. And a lot of international schools have some kind of a winter break. They may not call it Christmas break, but they have a winter break. And we have maybe 2 weeks off. Sometimes we have 1 week off. It depends on the school. Like we say every time, it depends on the school and the country of what kind of breaks you get. But the majority of them have winter vacation. They might have a Chinese holiday. They might have separate holidays for their country. And then they might have summertime off. So it's very much like teaching in the States that you have extended vacations. And that's what we're talking about, where we're going. So you went Did the whole time did you go to Vegas? You got out of here right when school got out. December is like
Mid-December,
the 18th, right?
Yep, the 18th.
And
so,
you got on something and flew right away.
Yep, got on the plane. Well, we got out on a Thursday, and Friday night, Saturday morning, I'm on the plane back to the States. Land in the States. We spend 7 days in Bellingham, and then we're off to Vegas, and we had a lovely time. Let me just tell you about Vegas for just a minute for all those teachers out there who have Vegas on their list. It is a ton of fun. Lots of families, lots of young people and kids out on the streets, even till 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. Shows are going. We went to the Gordon Ramsay restaurant. We went and did Cirque du Soleil.
I go to bed at 9 o'clock, Kent. I'm a
You know
teacher.
what? On vacation, though, you could stay till 10. You could stay up to 10:30.
Could I stay up till 10:30? The
And-
extended curfew?
And you get to go to the bathroom whenever you want.
Oh, my God. They have bathrooms there, too? I've never been to Vegas, and that's great that you can afford to go as a teacher. I mean, there's a lot of things that are expensive there, but some things aren't as expensive.
Well, Vegas has turned into, like most places in the United States, it's a pretty expensive venture. But one of the nice things about international teaching is that I think international teachers are a little bit more conscious about putting a little bit aside for their travel.
Right, I do the same thing. It would save, even when I was making like $12,000 a year, I was setting aside money for the big vacations.
That's right. And for us, that's the winter break and the summer break. And there's options around spring break usually. And if you're in the Middle East, there's a Eid break around the Ramadan holiday. Around the month of Ramadan, there's an Eid break following that, which is another week. Every country has sort of these little pockets where you could travel.
Did you spend Christmas and New Year's in Vegas?
So we spent Christmas there. We avoided the New Year. We came home just before the New Year, but we did spend Christmas there. It's just, we had a great time. We went into a nice fancy restaurant just outside the Strip, had ourselves a nice meal with a nice bottle of wine, if I could say that. And we just celebrated and had a great time. Everyone was friendly. The other thing about international teaching is you get to know people all over the place. And so we had actually friends visit us that we work overseas with who popped in for a few days at a time. We went out and did karaoke with them, and we went and had a great meal with them and did a food tour. Just, I can't say enough about the nice time that we had.
Well, I'm glad you had such a good time. I mean, I had an even better time, but that's another story.
Well, actually, it's not another story. I'll wrap up on my vacation. You can ask me a few more questions, and then I'd love to hear about yours.
Okay, so let's ask you some more questions. So both of you went through, like, the airlines, boom, you fly there, you spend a little time at home. When you go home on vacation, you must always set aside a little time to see family and friends before you go off on your own little vacation to, like, Christmas, right?
This year, my little brother's having, him and his wife are having a brand new baby. And so they were wrapped up in that. And we did not want to, during the pandemic, we didn't want to go and,
we didn't
want to be spreading the germs or anything around a brand new expected family member. So we just talked on the phone. And usually we would stop in and say hi to the parents or the siblings or the nieces and nephews. That's a big part of being overseas, is that you're away from loved ones. But this year was just us doing our thing. And we did sit on some time, and our viewers, our listeners, our loyal fans will find this to be quite interesting. You know, we don't spend a lot of time in the United States because we're here overseas. We threw a party. We threw a block party for our neighborhood when we got back.
You did?
Yes, we did, because we don't get to learn who our neighbors are.
It was like a proof of life party. Like,
Yeah.
you still live there, you still are alive, and you are overseas, but you're back and part of the neighborhood.
That's right. And, I think this day and age, you don't get to know your neighbors quite as much, particularly if you're in and out, you're overseas, you're in town. We discussed, my wife and I, that we wanted to get to know our neighbors. We bought all sorts of stuff, food and beverages for a party, and we went around to our 40 neighbors, and we passed out flyers, and then we just opened up, and there we were. We had a party, and we had about half a dozen to a dozen of our neighbors come and hang out with us, and we had a great time getting to know our neighbors, and they can't wait till the summertime when either us or another family does the same thing.
So let's go back here for a second. You handed out 40 different neighbor invitations, and you only got 6.
Well, it's funny because people are weary of their neighbors. I couldn't believe how many people have cameras now on their doorsteps. These, you've seen these doorbells that are cameras?
The smart homes.
I've lived overseas now for a better part of a decade. I didn't know.
Everybody's got a camera, Ken.
I didn't know this. I mean, they see me coming, and all of a sudden the doors are locking.
They need some forewarning before you show up on the doorstep.
But, you need to make an effort. When you live overseas, whether it's with your family, your friends, your neighbors, you got to make the effort because they're not going to rush to see you necessarily. So you've got to make the effort to see them.
I see how you're doing it. Going to Vegas and then having a block party or a neighborhood party, what a great idea. I think I would take that back with me at some point if I ever did buy a house. And if I had neighbors, I would probably do the same thing.
I would always do it. I think it's so important to know your neighbors nowadays. Just a sense of community, a sense of security, and just the fun that you can have with them, particularly during time of a pandemic where people are staying closer to home.
Maybe more people will let you in their house once they see you on the camera now that they know you're...
Now that my face is known on the camera, that's right. And we also make sure to grab a few packages off the porches when we're there.
Of course you do. I mean, that's what they're sitting there for, right?
So, I had a lovely winter break. I don't know if I would choose another job over teaching overseas because the vacations, you always make the most of them. And I understand that you made the most of did you see that segue there?
Well, I like your segue.
Yeah,
that's great.
I understand you made the most of your winter break this year. Do you want to tell our fans, our viewers, our listeners about your vacation this year?
Because I'm a world traveler that I am and all that good stuff. My style of living overseas now for 20 years is I spend vacations and I sort of go back and forth. So I'll go back home for a little bit on one vacation. The other vacation is definitely travel. If I go home at Christmas, then I wouldn't go home in summer. If I go home in summer, I wouldn't go home at Christmas or other vacations in between. So I usually only show up once a year. And I always announce now that I go home. 10 years ago, I think, I went home and didn't tell anybody. And I showed up on the front doorstep and I got out. My dad picked me up and he didn't tell Mom. And Mom came out and she was coming out to the car to get in the car with Dad. And I jump out of the car and she just about had a heart attack. And I'm like, at their age, I can't do that to people.
You can't surprise them. You can't just sneak up on them.
No. And I used to go home and knock on my buddy Matt's door and be like, ta-da, here's Greg, stop everything. Let's go to the bar. Let's go party a little bit. And Matt, has family, and I can't do that to Matt anymore. I mean, used to in the old days, I used to do that. I don't do that anymore. So I always announce when I'm coming home so people can make plans. They do want to see you. A couple, like the 2 or 3 friends I have, they want to spend time with you as well as family. This Christmas, I decided I was going to go on a dive trip again, and I've done this in the past.
Now, when you say dive trip, you mean like a trip to a dive or actually diving trip?
A dive bar. I went to a dive bar in Bahrain. No. All right, listener. No, that's an inside joke. Yeah. I love dive bars. No, this is a diving trip, scuba diving. So I'm a big diver when I'm not teaching. I'm underwater usually. The Maldives is it's a little country off east coast of Africa, just below India. And it's on the equator. So find the equator, find Ecuador, go all the way east, and you'll land on this little island country called Maldives. And have you been there before?
I have not. It's on my list.
Oh, you have to go there. I've been there like 6 or 7 times now, And for us, it's not that much of a travel. From the Middle East, it's about 5 hours of flight. And there's a whole lot in between there of sitting in airports. But that's the way travel is. I landed in this little airport in Male, which is their capital. I waited for about 4 hours. And then I joined my group, and I got on the ship and took my shoes off. And 3 weeks later, I put my shoes back on again. I stayed on that ship for 3 full weeks of diving
3
every
weeks
day.
of diving this year. Wow.
Yep, like 60 dives. I mean, they call it a liveaboard. So anybody that's a dive enthusiast out there, it's a little bit more expensive because it's a destination dive where you have to fly there and do that. Only reason it wasn't a perfect trip is that my brother Jeff was supposed to go, right? We had it all set up, flights and everything. He got the COVID right before he left.
And they wouldn't let him on the airplane.
They wouldn't even let him near the airplane.
Now, back up a step. Now, you're Greg, the single guy. And a lot of times I'll meet people, particularly women who travel abroad, teach abroad. They'll talk about how, I just don't want to travel alone. It's not really my cup of tea. And a lot of single teachers will maybe avoid the grand 3-week trip on their own. Well, for you, you seem to have no trouble just picking up and going wherever you want to go. Has that always been the case for you? Or did you you have to kind of grow into that?
No, that's just sort of my nature. That's what kind of material I'm made out of. There's certain people in this world that just get up and go. And there's women, there's men, teachers and non-teachers that just say, I'm going to get up and go travel alone. And there's a lot of dangers out there. There's a lot of risk out there, especially for women. But I've had a good run so far. In my life, all my trips I've taken alone have been just wonderful. I would say most of them are just wonderful trips. And I don't know if it's just getting used to how you travel. It's getting used to protecting yourself in certain ways. Maybe it's the cool local people I've got to know while I'm on the trips. Dude, I don't know what it is, but I have great vacations. And this was one of the top of my life.
Now, for this dive vacation, obviously we love to hear about the actual part where you're underwater, but can you say a few words about what happened above water? What was the boat like? What were the people like? How was that part of the trip?
And I took a long shot. I'd never done this before because it cost me money. It cost like $250 a day to do it, right? If you're thinking about how much vacations cost. If you break it down by the day, it's about $250 a day with diving. But you're on a 100-foot yacht, and it's got a following dive ship with it. And you get on board, it's like a 5-star hotel floating around different islands for 10-day trips, right? So you pay for the diving and for the living on board. So they cook your meals. You sit on the stern of the boat on the second floor and overlooking a new island every morning or something. You have breakfast with 20 people. It is amazing. They have 10 cabins, which are for 2 people, and you go with your spouse or you go as a single. They pair you up with somebody. They take care of all your diving, but besides that, you're floating around looking at all the islands in the Maldives, maybe up to the north, maybe to the south. You're just eating 3 meals a day. You're swimming, you're snorkeling, you're scuba diving, you're sleeping. I mean, it's like sleep, dive, and eat and repeat. That's what it is.
It almost sounds like a luxury cruise with diving interspersed.
It totally is. That's exactly how I describe it. It's a luxury cruise with diving included. And everybody on board is about diving. So what's special about this is there's no kids. And I don't like kids during my vacations. I don't even want to see anybody under 25.
We'll be bringing Matt, the family guy, into this discussion, get his opinion.
Well, I love his kids, of course. I love my own family kids and my friends' kids, but I don't want to see strangers' kids anywhere on vacation.
Yeah, that's right.
But that was the joy of it. It was adults that were only there for diving. Guests on board, there's about 20 guests total. And this is one of maybe 45 different live-aboard companies in the Maldives. In the Maldives. That was a sandwich that came up. And I've never done that on air before. Maybe I should edit that out.
I don't know. It just shows the appreciation for sandwiches.
It's just part of the life.
It's part of who we are.
Sandwich appreciation.
If I eat a meal with you and it doesn't come up once or twice, I know it's not a real meal.
Oh, I'm sorry to be so gross, listeners. We're having fun here. But yeah, Maldives, if you ever get a chance to go on a live-aboard around the world, I've done it in the Philippines and I've been in the Maldives, but I haven't been anywhere else because I just started this a little bit later in life because it's expensive, right? I probably spent about $5,000 on just the vacation for those 3 weeks. If you include the extra things that you had to buy, like alcohol, or if you wanted to buy extra things on the trip, then you have to pay for those extra. But everything else is included. And the flight itself, you have to pay for all these things, and it comes out to a nice, pretty penny. But it's worth it because you only do it once in a while. Rather than go to the dive shop where you have to drive to the dive shop, you have to get in the boat, load all the gear, go drive out to the dive site, spend the afternoon, then come back all tired. They have everything in the dive boat already. The dive boat follows like a little puppy. And we get to this area, and the yacht will anchor in this cove, and then we all get into the dive boat where everything's all set for us already from the last dive. And we get in, we go 5 minutes out in the little boat, and we're in our dive spot. We go in and we dive, and we come back out, and we get back on the ship and have a meal or take a nap. And then we do it all again in, another hour. We did 3 or 4 dives a day. So it's about 60 dives that I did over my holiday.
Wow.
Which is about 60 hours underwater. Fantastic. I love it. That's my thing, Kent, And you've seen pictures before, and I have them on my website, saintsomewhere.online.com. That's the first time I've ever mentioned my website on the ITP. I'm celebrating it now. There's so many things to think about. There's newsletters, and there's videos, and there's pictures, and I can share it with other people that way. That's how I do it with my family. Remember, I don't always go home for vacation.
That's right.
I have to keep in touch with my family, and I do that by doing a newsletter and a website. And that's how Mom and Dad get to see it and everything, and see the newsletters that I might write for them. And I did 3 newsletters this time about the Maldives trip.
You wrote the newsletters while you were on the boat.
I did partially, yes. I had to keep track of information that was happening, like the names of the people, where they're from. I mean, there are people on this boat from 5 or 6 or 7 different countries. We had 4 different languages being spoken the whole time.
You ever meet other international teachers?
I met an international teacher on this trip, the very first trip. One of the women, I'd have to look up her name because I wrote it down, but she has been a teacher, Kent, now overseas. She's an Australian, but she's been a teacher overseas now for over 20 years.
Yeah, that's nice.
Like, she's been in 14 different schools and 14 different countries. Can you imagine that? This woman was amazing. I wanted to get her on. I want to get her on a podcast.
Yeah, you should get her on and join us because this is someone who knows the business. You and I, we just chuckle about it.
We're nothing compared to that woman. She's 14 different countries and 14 international schools, and she's talking about how she got. They had a political unrest in one school, so she counted that one because they've basically closed. So she had to go to find another job.
Yep.
These are the stories that come from people that have been overseas for so long, But yeah, that was my trip, Kent. I had a wonderful dive vacation. I think everything went right except my brother getting COVID and couldn't join me.
Do you guys going to do the dive again together in the future?
I think it has to be done next year again at Christmas. If Jeff will join me, I'm going to go for sure. I still have the trip paid for, right? So we went on 2 different dive trips, and I had paid for his also, so already in advance. So therefore, we have 2 sitting in there banked.
Okay.
Like you do with your airline tickets
with your
and stuff during
we all
COVID.
have 3 or 4 of those waiting around for us, don't we?
How many trips not talking too much about COVID, but how many trips have you banked?
I think 3. Yeah, I think I had 3 this year.
So
we've been working down slowly. My wife and I have been working down our inventory. She's been back and forth a few times.
To use up the mileage.
To use it up. To use up those miles, to use up those tickets, because otherwise you never know. If you don't keep track of them, they could just disappear.
I have a dive trip that I paid for. It was like $3,000, and it was for 2 years ago. And it was a trip to Indonesia to go on a liveaboard. And they closed the country the day after I bought the tickets. So not the plane tickets, but I bought the tickets to get on board.
That's right.
So after I paid for it, they call them up and they're like, "Well, we're sorry, we can't reimburse you, but we'll bank it for 2 or 3 years, 2 years." And in this COVID time, I'm sure if I said I need to extend it a little bit because I can't go next year because I might end up going to Maldives. But it's a tricky situation.
Well, one of our coworkers spent over $10,000 on a New Zealand tour, all-inclusive tour. New Zealand shut down, and it has not reopened yet.
No, it's still closed, right?
That's right. She's still waiting.
So she has a
$10,000 New Zealand credit.
Now, I guarantee you, teachers out there, most international teaching, you don't have $10,000 to spare on a trip, but we are working at a great school with a great package and everything, but we'll talk about that at some future point. We'll talk about this school. We don't talk about this school, and we've worked our way up here, haven't we, Kent? Because in other years, I haven't been able to afford going.
Oh, no. I used to take staycations in my previous.
That was Yemen. So
yeah,
you
I was
did
in Yemen.
Did you do a staycation
know that I was in
there?
Yemen. I did staycations. Now, there's 2 reasons why I did staycations in Yemen. The first reason is
Financial.
we didn't really have the means to travel all over the world like we do now. But second of all is being in Yemen full time is almost like a permanent vacation. It's an amazing country. So much to see. For me to stay there for 2 years without traveling, I made the best of it. Got out and saw things.
Well, you know what? You're taking my advice, and I have some specific advice for our listeners, especially for the people going into it or that are already teachers and overseas. But my advice for anybody and everybody in international teaching, stay at least Christmas. Spend Christmas in your host country and see what it's like. Venezuela, I remember I had a girlfriend, and I stayed with her family to see their Christmas vacation, like to see what their Christmas culture stuff was. What was it like to spend Christmas in another country, in my home country I was living in, instead of just leaving all the time, right? Of course, I went to New Year's somewhere else, because for New Year's, Kent, do you know my rule?
What's your rule for New Year's?
Well, it's not a rule.
Be
it's
overseas.
More like, yeah. But back in 2000, I made a resolution. I would spend New Year's in a new country every year.
And how close have you come to doing it every year?
One year I went back home. In the very beginning, I think it was the second year I was overseas, I went back for Christmas, and I didn't get out for New Year's. So I sort of like ate that year. But the rest of the years, including the last time I went home to the States for my parents' wedding anniversary, it was 2015, and I went back, and I go back during that Christmas. I won't go back during summer. So I went back, spent my Christmas with my family. Parents had their anniversary the day after Christmas, and then my buddy Joe, God, I love this guy. Joe calls me up and says, "What are we doing for New Year's to get?" And I said, "Well, I need to leave the country."
And where did you guys go?
And he said, "I'll call you right back." And guess what we did?
Where did you go?
The day of New Year's, we went New Year's Eve up to Canada.
Yep.
My brother, long story short, but we used my brother's pickup truck, thank God, and we went through the snow up through Michigan, and we hit Canada. It was absolutely boring. But when I mean boring, I mean it was Canada that was boring. It was not Joe or I, because Joe knows, I've always said, it's not where you are, what you're doing, it's who you're with. So we had a great time, but it was Canada, right? And that part of Canada, right above Sault Ste. Marie, I think it was right above Michigan. It's a whole other story, but Joe and I made sure that I was out of the country for New Year's, and that was in my list of New Year's. It was following through with my resolution ever since the beginning.
Well, where did I spend 3 of my New Year's over the last decade? On an airplane.
Did you really?
Really. As a matter of fact, they announce technically when the new year is, but since you're going over all this time in the middle of the flight. But I spent 3 of my New Year's in the last 10 years on planes.
Well, if I was ever on a plane during New Year's, wherever I landed, that's what I counted as my country. That would be where you were going. Because I'd spent overnight or spent the week there, whatever it was, right? I know that the New Year's resolution was difficult this year.
Yep.
And once again, I put in a plug for my buddy Joe, because Joe said, "Greg, you are going back to the Maldives again." And I did. I went to the Maldives last year. So technically, I was in the Maldives, right?
Okay, yes.
And I promised I'd be in a different country every year. So this is how I got around it, Kent. The Maldives lays right on the equator.
Okay.
So last year I was in the south. On the southern part, the southern equator part. So I was in the southern part of the world.
Yes.
And this year I was in the northern part, north of the equator. It's like on the 4th parallel or something. I was up there in the north. So therefore, technically,
our viewers want to know, our listeners want to know, is there actually signs that tell you where the equator is? Is there a big red line that goes across?
No, there's a whale shark that just sort of waves you through. As you cross over, there's a couple sharks and a whale shark and a couple manta rays. They're just like, come on over.
You're 4
passing.
degrees north.
That was the most.
Have you ever crossed the equator on a boat?
Oh yeah, I did last year too.
You did last year.
But I was in the south for New Year's, as far as everybody knows, and I was in the north this year, as far as everybody knows. So I can still stay together with my New Year's resolution.
Well, I can't wait to.
It's complicated, I know.
We're all waiting to hear where you go this year for New Year's. Brand new year, right? 2022.
How am I supposed to know that, Kent? I can't even plan tomorrow's lessons.
Sometimes you plan your new country a couple hours in advance.
I mean, what a wild discussion. We've gone every which way with this. And it's so exciting because as an international teacher, we don't just say, let's hold back for a second. Kent,
yes.
When you lived in the States, where would you go on vacation for Christmas?
The town about 10 miles away from my hometown.
Right, and you see the same people every vacation, and you do the Christmas thing, and you have traditions, which there's something to be said for traditions, right?
Yes.
But no way, dude. I used to go to the same place, the same time, all the time, and you're lucky if you get out of the state.
That's right.
And a lot of that time you're sort of grumbling because you have to travel to get there, or maybe people are visiting and you have to set up the house, whatever that's like. But boy, I tell you, now it's like pull out your passport, buy the plane tickets, and that's normal for us.
That's right. Where are you going to go this year? That's
Whether
always
it's the
the discussion.
U.S. or somewhere else, where are we going to go this year? What are we going to do? And we plan out. You plan ahead so you can afford it, number one, if you can. And number two, you want to make sure that that's your plan A, plan B, plan C, whatever. Maybe you have to go home and see somebody. But other than that, if you're free, Let's go. Let's go over here.
I'll tell you the next 3 things I have on the books very quickly.
Ooh, I want to hear.
I've got Kyoto, Japan on my list.
North Korea.
I have not done, yes, North Korea. I have not done Japan yet, so we have Tokyo and Kyoto on our lists. We haven't done Iceland, and Iceland's become very popular over the past couple years since we've been out here. So we have Iceland on our list. And the third one is my 3rd or 4th trip back to France. We want to do the Bordeaux region of France. Because the last time we were there, we did the Burgundy region.
Oh, really?
Yes, so we have that on our books. So the next 3 trips we take will probably at least 2 of those.
I'm flabbergasted, and I'm sort of at a loss of words. I don't know where I want to go next. I've seen a lot of countries. How many countries have you been to, do you think?
36 now.
36.
36, and that's all just within the last 10 years. Before that would have been about 2.
Yeah, I think I'm at about 60. 65,
60
70, something
or
like
65?
that. Or 70, I can't
That's
remember.
going to be at least 50% of the current countries on our map, I'd say.
No, 50% is like 100. So there's what, 209?
There's about 200?
I think there's about 209 countries
I think that's how many
officially.
bones we have. Maybe 200.
No, that's 200. That's 204. You 4th grade science teacher. What's wrong with
someone
you?
can fact checked us.
Or is it 206?
I think it's 206.
I just totally ragged on you for that.
Our
I said
listeners are out there
204.
going, don't those guys have Google?
It's like, yeah, I'm going to Google that right now while we're talking
I
here.
think it's actually 208 if I have to.
Okay, so the countries of the world,
Yes.
it's going to change because of border lines,
Geopolitical
because of geopolitical
borders, yes.
stuff, right? So let's say 209. So if I can reach 100,
Yep.
right, that's going to be pretty good. But it's COVID, it's tough to travel.
I think you'll get to 100.
I want to go see the
think you'll get to
Kiwis. I
100.
want to go find some hobbits in New Zealand. That's one of my top
I did New
priorities.
Zealand a couple years ago. We loved New Zealand. As a matter
Really?
of fact, I've talked to many teachers who say that there's always teaching opportunities there in New Zealand, particularly for teachers who are teaching in English language countries. New Zealand's one of them, and there's opportunities.
Well, why would you want to teach in an English-speaking country when you can go anywhere in the world and teach and learn a new language and speak English as a lingua franca for teaching anyway, right? You don't have to speak English to go overseas.
That's right. Here we are in the Middle East. And we
Wait,
don't...
excuse me. You don't have to speak a foreign language other than English to go overseas and teach. That was a big question for people,
Yeah,
right?
that's
you don't,
right.
Your language,
Yeah,
your
that's
lingua
right.
franca, the language that you
Yep.
teach in at international schools is always English.
That's right.
So you don't
Yes.
have to learn but what you're saying is there's some opportunities in New Zealand, which
That's
I've
right.
always heard it's
Yeah.
difficult to get into teaching positions because there's so many people that speak English and want to go on like a vacation. So those jobs fill up pretty fast. That's what I've heard. I'm not saying I'm an authority on it because I
Nor am
haven't
I.
even been there before.
We should stick to bones.
We need to find an authority on New Zealand and getting a job in
Well-
Australia or New Zealand and talk to them.
I would say I'm going to vote that we bring Joe on the air one of these days.
Yeah.
And that lady from Australia who's been
wanna-
touching all over the world. We need to get her.
I want to teach, yes, and I want to know more about Tasmania.
Oh, I
I
sailed
want to
right
go.
by it.
I want to see a Tasmanian devil. So I'll tell you why someday because of my Bugs Bunny history.
Bugs
But
Bunny, that's right.
I want to go to Tasmania and I want to see a Tasmanian devil and I want to teach in a Tasmanian school. I wonder if that's possible. Of course it is. You know why? Everything's possible.
Everywhere needs teachers.
Oh my gosh. Well, you know what's interesting? I went to another foreign country on a trip alone. You and your wife went on a trip back home to the U.S. And Matt and Stacy and their kids, they had staycation. So they didn't even go anywhere. And it's going to be great to hear about that because when you have a staycation, you spend a lot of time together, but you're relaxed, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're saving some money.
Yeah, like when you guys stayed home that vacation, you spent all your money in the summertime that you saved by not even traveling. And you just sat back, you read a book. I've done this too, man. When there's nothing to do, especially there's nothing to do in the country, right? If there's not much to do, you're sitting back, you're relaxing, I'm going to read a book, catch up on some TV, throw on Netflix, sleep all afternoon, whatever,
Maybe even
right?
1 year we'll write a book.
That's true, you
That
might.
could be a teaser.
Or play some tennis. You could even learn how to play flute.
That's what I've done.
You know, listeners, before we move on and say goodbye to Kent because it's almost done with lunch, our episode's going to continue with Matt. But before that, did you know that you can learn at any age? And I tell you, international teachers, the great thing about teaching overseas is you have time alone. Even if you're with family, Matt may not agree with 4 kids and a wife. He may not agree with me, but you have time alone. and you have
That's
your own
right.
time.
Yep.
And like Kent has been learning how to play flute.
That's right. I have a flute
Kent
teacher.
is learning tennis.
Yep.
What else are you learning, Kent?
I've been taking classes in Japanese.
Japanese and in anime, right?
And yeah, I've been watching lots of anime and reading manga. Matter of fact, we can have a whole episode on hobbies that you do when you're teaching internationally.
Oh my God, I'd hate to say, should we use one of those, the catchphrases? Are you a lifelong learner?
A lifelong learner.
That's from what, 2000, I think? It was one of those, every education book had to say, are you a 21st century teacher? Are you a lifelong learner?
I am now a 20th century teacher.
I'm an analog teacher in a digital age.
Well, thank you for having me back. I'll tell you what, I'm excited that we got the podcast going for 2022.
We have to apologize, don't we?
Yeah,
It's been
we
too
got to
long.
apologize. Our fans are out there. Our fan is out there
The
wondering
one fan,
where we
my
are.
mom.
Your mom. She keeps calling. When is the podcast going to happen, Greg?
She asked me the other night.
I love it. Well, say hello to everyone for me. I can't wait to hear from Matt and maybe Stacy, and have a great rest of your January.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to log in with Matt here in just a second, and we'll continue this conversation. Thank you, and see you next time. On the line now, I've got none other than Matt Judd. Matt Judd, welcome back to our show, yours and my show. It's good to have you back, man.
Yeah, Greg. It's really nice to be back. Ladies and gentlemen, don't attempt to adjust your dial. It is really me. And Greg's dug me out of my study cave. And I'm happy to rejoin the International Teacher Podcast, the official podcast of nothing. We don't really have sponsors yet, but it's good to be back. It's been since what? November?
You were studying. I thought you were playing golf. I told all the listeners every time with Kent that you were playing golf. What were you doing, Matt?
Yeah, I golf once a month. So, yeah, not really that. No, just still doing grad school stuff. November was a crazy month. I think I was wrapping up 3 different courses during that time period. So running up through the end of November, early December, it was all grad school, all work, and then all running the athletic programs here at school, too, running tournaments and stuff like that. So it wasn't a ton of time to get anything else done.
Well, you know what, though, because you're working all day, every day, and then your weekends are packed with working to catch up with the stuff that you can't do late at night after you put your kids to sleep. I mean, you're up at all hours, too, because you do have to meet once in a while, not face-to-face, but live online for meeting with some of your classes, right?
Yeah, I love daylight savings because that means I get to sleep in until 4:30 in the morning. But when it goes back to the regular, we have class at 3:30 in the morning. So
yeah, I've been there too, man. God.
Yeah, man, it's brutal, but it's okay. Someday it's all going to be worth it when I finally find that job in pro sports. And that's okay. It's a small price to pay.
Exactly. I love it. So, I was telling our listeners before with Kent, we talked about our vacations, and you did the staycation this Christmas, didn't you? Can you walk us through that a little bit, man? Well, tell us what happened.
Greg, I can't remember if we talked in past episodes about what happened last year during the winter break during 2020.
Refresh my memory. I can't remember. Go ahead.
All right. This is where you turn on the pity switch if we have one of those dials. Just feel free to dial that up full blast. My family and I had gone to the Maldives, and I know. And on day 6 of our trip, I woke up to a message from a friend of mine that the country that we reside in closed their borders. And we were due to leave the Maldives the next day to fly back, which means we got locked out of the Middle East. And when you're in the middle of a small island in the middle of the Indian Ocean, you're kind of out of options as to where you're going to go once flights are canceled and all that. To make a short story long, we ended up having to stay another week in the Maldives, which was awesome, but detrimental to the checkbook.
And then
we ended up it was incredibly expensive. I don't even want to talk about how much it cost us. And then we had to spend, just to get out of the Maldives, a week in Bahrain as well, which really wasn't so bad either. But when you're basically locked in a hotel room with your kids for a week,
that's 2
you start
weeks.
Thinking about...
a week in the Maldives. What's that? A week in the Maldives. And, if you're a listener here that doesn't know about the Maldives, I usually go on a cruise, but Matt's talking about being at one of the resorts. And then he comes back to the main city. You went back to the main city, Male, to get, and then, right?
Yeah.
Or did you stay on the resort for another week?
On our way back, we left the resort, and then on our way back to the main island, the travel agent ended up finding us a last-minute booking because this is also Christmas, which is their busiest time of year. So, and at that time, the UK was locking down because of COVID. India was locking down because of COVID. So every Tom, Dick, and Harry with a credit card from the UK and India was headed toward the Maldives. And it was funny because when they got there, they didn't need PCR tests at the time. And so that made for a really interesting trip, too, which I won't even get into on here. Maybe that's another horror story moment. And luckily, nobody got sick, but we ended up getting caught out for 3 weeks. And the reason I bring that up, because that plays into why we stayed here this year. We didn't want to go anywhere. We didn't want to deal with anything. We had coworkers that were flying all over the place, having great trips. Goodness knows all that. But we were more than content. I'll take that back. I was probably more than content to want to just stay here and do nothing other than chill, because it meant no work, no tournaments, no grad school, and not getting locked out. So I was perfectly content with that.
When I traveled to the Maldives this last time, a couple weeks ago, it was just me. So I was the one stuck in the airport. Sure. I could sit there and have a beer and watch people. I didn't have 4 kids and a wife to worry about in the airport, which is like quadruple duty for you and Stacy to watch over the kids and make sure that they're entertained for the whole time you travel, as well as paying for every single one of you to have the test done, to stay in the extra hotel room or 2 hotel rooms. Everything's quadrupled for you guys. I traveled with you a lot, and I can tell, like, if you stayed here this time, you stayed here, it was because travel's been multiplied as far as problems.
Well, and the cost of that whole thing was the last thing on my mind. It was how long are we going to be locked out for? Because nobody knew anything and nobody was talking to anybody. And that was the stressful part of it. Had it just been me or just been the 2 of us, I'd still be buried under the ice cream machine, having somebody bring me beers every 13 minutes. Without a doubt.
You brought up last year, and last year I went from the Maldives. I was on my own trip to the Maldives, separate from your family. I had been on a liveaboard, and I got back to the capital city without a hotel to stay at, and I found out that the country closed. So I got on the first thing smoking to the States. I took another 20 days off and docked my pay and everything. I mean, I used up a lot of vacation last year and ended up paying for it this year.
That was the most Greg story I've ever heard in my life, too, by the way. Like, you had no idea. And then you just rolled in like, all right, that was great. I'm ready to go back.
That's right.
Guess I'm going to the States. Oh, I love that story.
Well, this year you decided to stay home and avoid all the travel headaches, especially with COVID during this shortened 3 weeks. It's short for a family to travel. So tell us what you did back here then, man. Come on, tell me a story.
It's number one. The number one thing I wanted to do was read, and not anything grad school related. I had a laundry list of books I wanted to check out, and sports. I just sat there and I read. Yeah, I read sports books. But I wanted to, technically no. I only read one sports book. I read a book called Intangibles. It was about team chemistry. I read another book about the positive, the psychology of flow, it's called. What is it? I haven't even finished it yet. It's a crazy good book. And so that was really entertaining. And then anyway, enough of that. So anyway, right before Christmas, I decided to take a last minute trip. And there was this electronic dance music festival that was hosted here, and it's called Middle Beast or Sandstorm, and it was in Riyadh. And I got a green light to go on this trip at noon on a Saturday, and I was out the door by 1. And as I was leaving the front door, I was still booking my hotel, figuring out where I was going to stay, because I had about a 4-hour drive to Riyadh for that. If you don't know what the Middle Beast is, it's one of the biggest electronic dance music festivals in the world. So if you're into EDM like I am, big time, it's the top DJs on the planet. Like anybody who's anybody was there. Like the night I was there, I saw Morton, David Guetta, I saw Armin van Buuren, Fisher. Also, anybody who listens to EDM would know who those names are. And it was me. And the night I was there, they were expecting over 200,000 attendees. So it was myself and 200,000 plus people. Never really been around that many people in my life. And it was one of the coolest, funnest, weirdest, craziest experiences I've ever had. Just because I was, from the 200 plus thousand people there. I was the only American that I saw walking around the joint.
You're kidding.
A few people from UK, a few people from Europe were there because they were carrying around their flags and stuff like that. I don't know if that's a festival thing. This was even my first electronic dance music festival. And basically, I walked in. We have this massive stage that costs, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars to put up. I literally the crowd let me walk right up to the front. Like in the US, you'd get, pounded and pushed and knocked over because people are just going nuts there. Everybody was dancing and having a great time. I literally walked past thousands of people and they let me go right up to the front of I've never seen anything like it. So here I'd paid like $35 US to go to this show. I was there for probably 7 hours. And it was unbelievable. Like you'd pay big time money in the US to get that kind of access. And it was just me rolling right up there. I can't really get into all of the specifics of the festival, but
7 hours of EDM, electronic music, just floating your way from this massive stage. And these people let you in up to the stage like that. That's great. You didn't expect any of that.
No, I was totally blown away. Like if I'm still here next year, I'm spending all 4 days. Like it was unbelievable. I didn't even do my homework and place. I had no idea what to expect. And then there were other famous singers from Egypt, like a guy named Amr Diab. I don't know if you've ever remembered him from your days in Egypt, but Amr Diab was playing. Just there was like French DJs on side stages and stuff like that I'd never heard of that are super famous. It was cool, unbelievably fun. The next day, I went to go check out this place called the Edge of the World. And are you familiar with the Edge of the World?
Well, I am, but it's one of those places you usually go with like a safari and a group of people. You just went off on your own and like got a driver or what?
Yeah. I just jumped in the car and was like, I'm going to go check this out because we knew we were staying. I wanted to see if the boys and I would be able to go check out Edge of the World. And so I was like, if this is a trip that's doable for me, I'm just basically, for those of you who don't know what it is, Google it and check it out. And then you'll wonder why I'm worried about it, because it's basically 1,000-foot drop with no railings.
It's a place out in the middle of the desert, and it's a massive rock cliff. It's like just you could fall right off and die.
It's basically a basin that was washed away. And so you've got, because obviously this part of the world used to be covered in water. And so this was all just washed out, and it's carved out this amazingly beautiful looking landscape that kind of almost puts the Grand Canyon to shame in some cases.
But there's no railings, there's no safety, there's nothing. It's just like you drive out there, right?
There's no signs. There's no, this is one of the most famous landmarks in this country. And I'm driving through villages on dirt roads. Like, where am I going? I mean, it's still on Google Maps, so it was fine. It was a cool drive. I went through some cool little, I guess, villages, you'd call them, and stuff like that. And I got to what Google said was Edge of the World. And at Google, if you're listening, your directions are horrible. Google couldn't even help me find the Edge of the World. I ended up finding this dirt parking lot behind an old dilapidated water tower. And it was not the Edge of the World. And I was like, what did I mess up? Because there's no signs or anything anywhere. It's like you just drive until you magically find the Edge of the World. And apparently I can't even find the Edge of the World. As it turns out, 5 days before I'd gotten there, a car drove off this side of the Edge of the World. So when you think about it, you've seen people drive here, so you're probably not terribly surprised by hearing that news. And God bless them, 5 people were killed in the crash. The vehicle is still down there, but they literally, I don't know what they were doing, because it's pretty hard. Okay, yeah, it's hard. Driving off the Edge of the World is as hard as it sounds. Like, you almost got to be like, yeah, I hope we don't drive off the edge of the world. Oh, we did.
So you ended up finding it.
Yeah. So anyway,
you found it. It wasn't the water thing.
I found the trailhead for it. They basically, what had happened is whoever had moved the location off that part of the map because they didn't want people going there. Had I pursued that, I was right at the beginning of the trailhead. I just didn't realize it because I got back and talked to a lot of people about it anyway. So they helped me find the Edge of the World when I returned. And they had basically taken 2 dump trucks and dumped it in front of the passage to get onto the dirt road that takes you to the Edge of the World. Because once you get to the dirt road, it's another hour and a half out into the middle of the desert. So this car you have to set out looking for the Edge of the World to find this particular thing. It's not like, oh, we were just bumming along and we drove off the edge of the world by accident. So it's coming. And it's still, you just got to wonder, what in the heck were these people doing?
I'm getting in the car with you, and I'm going to squeeze in between the boys in the back or something like that. All right? Yeah. Maybe I'll sit up in front.
Well, we're going back within the next month.
I got to go.
Yeah, I'm hell-bent on getting back there.
First, I'm going to Google it.
But anyway, so then I came back, and it was a wash. I never found it, but at least I know where the trailhead is now. So now I know where to get there, and apparently they're putting up some safety barriers and stuff like that. So thank you for doing that, and maybe put up some signs, because you know what? The longer I live here, the more, I never thought I'd hear myself say this, but the desert is super cool, man. If you spend some time out running around in the desert, there's so many. It's just weird, I guess. It's like us and lakes in Minnesota and Wisconsin. It's a beautiful place, but you don't think the desert is terribly significant. And then you get out there and maybe you watch a sunset and just the colors. It's incredible. Because one of the other things that we did, we took 2 trips, actually. There's a place that you can go shark tooth fossil hunting. Because like I said, it used to be covered with an ocean. There's supposedly a place where halfway between where we live and Riyadh. It's called Shark Tooth Wadi, which is like I don't know, what's a wadi, an oasis or something like that?
Yeah.
A nickname for an oasis. Anyway, so I went on Google Maps and I started looking at landforms for things that looked like it used to be covered with ocean. So basically we get up, we loaded the boys into the car, and it's about a 2.5-hour drive. And you get out to this spot that I had found using Google Maps and a couple of pins from friends who'd already been out there too, and just kind of trekked out into the middle of the desert and to some of these really cool basins that were washed away, really cool elevation changes and things like that. It just, a lot of people said it reminds them of Moab in Utah. I've never been out there, so I don't know, but a lot of people that I've talked to really thought it was like that. I thought it was kind of like in Tatooine in Star Wars, just kind of wandering around out there. It was really cool that way. And so we ended up finding several like shark tooth fossils that are, I don't know how many thousands of years old, but that was pretty cool. The fact that you can wander around the desert and find shark tooth fossils, that's something I never thought I would ever find myself doing. And it's quite fun. And it's a great way to keep from losing your kids, because they can literally wander for hundreds of yards and there's not really anywhere for them to go. And plus there's camels out there and they're afraid of the camels. So they usually come back when they see the camels come running along. So,
wow, what a trip, man. That's 2 trips that you did. One with the family out into the desert and one all by yourself over to Riyadh. Wow. And it's neat how these countries are all connected. We've got Bahrain, we've got Saudi Arabia, we've got Kuwait, we've got the UAE down below, and they're all accessible by car. There's a lot of people that go back and forth between the countries. Man, out in the middle of the desert like that, I haven't done that kind of trip yet. So like I said, I'm jumping in the car with you and going to the edge of the world at some point after we Google it. Maybe we'll talk to Google.
Within the month, we got to go, because then it starts getting hot and then we can't make the trip. So You'll like it. It's a good time. And Riyadh's a fun town too, man. We actually took the boys to Riyadh for a couple nights too, and hung out and had some great times, and just kind of toured around and checked it out. And we also went to a place called Al Hassa, which has some really cool caves that people had lived in back in, I don't know how many years ago, BC. But basically these caves had been washed out of these limestone caverns, and people lived back in there. And the boys had a heyday running through. They may have gone off trail a couple times, but.
So did you guys put up a Christmas tree and do the present thing and have Santa visit and all that kind of stuff this year?
Yeah, we actually couldn't get to Santa, so we did an annual Skype visit with Santa. So we were able to talk to him and get all their present requests in. So that was cool. The boys were pretty excited about that. We don't just put up a Christmas tree. We put up multiple Christmas trees. We got lights. We have decorations inside the house, outside the house, lights all over the place. Not like Clark W. Griswold would put up, but at least our little lights were twinkling.
So you didn't have 70,000 imported lights from, okay. That's great, dude.
No. But our little lights were twinkling.
Yeah, of course they were. They're twinkling, Clark. A lot of people don't understand what it's like to live overseas, and even in a country that's not Christian. So the fact that your family is having the Christmas tree, the presents, you guys go through Amazon, right? And you get all your presents, or you mule them back when you go home. You bring back Christmas presents with you.
I don't know how Santa does it in such a crafty manner. Wink, wink. But, he's crafty that way. But for all the presents we buy for the boys, we go Christmas shopping in the summertime. That means hitting a lot of the clearance racks at Walmart and Target between June and July and clearing those out. Don't tell the boys that. But
I won't wink, wink, because Santa Claus can find his way around everywhere pretty much.
Yeah, Santa manages, so it's all good in our hood. But yeah, we do our Christmas shopping in the summer, and then you bag drag it all back. So when you bring in 12 hockey bags back with at the end of a summer, that's probably a quarter of it is Christmas stuff, which you have to then hide. But I've got some pretty good hiding spots. So
and does your family have some kind of a New Year's kind of thing that you guys celebrate when you're together? Or
no, actually, my family was in bed at like 8:00. And I went to a small gathering and DJ'd that night. So nice. I got to have a little fun playing some tunes for just a small crowd of people, but they were a lot of fun and had a good time. So,
because you have all your own equipment for the DJing, man. I've seen you DJ, and your oldest also goes along DJing once in a while out on the beach. It's great. You have all your equipment, and ladies and gentlemen, listen out there. Matt Judd is a great DJ. He's got all of his DJ stuff. He's ordered more since he's been over here, but it's great to do little parties like that. You must have had fun doing that for New Year's.
We had a good time, but I've got a buddy here who takes it to the next level. He's got like the lasers and the smoke machines and you name it, the confetti cannons. He just goes all out. So I just kind of get to play music, and he is the one who really brings the party to it. So it's kind of cool the way he does that. But it's just a fun hobby, but it's a good time. But considering you're on this little clubhouse that's 40 yards from the ocean in the middle of the Middle East is just kind of a cool experience. So it was nice. It was a super chill New Year, and it was nice to just kind of hang out and be low key after being locked out last year. So I was very appreciative of the non-stress lifestyle I was leading at that time.
I think you would agree with me, Matt, that our listeners, as international teachers, or if they become international teachers, they should spend at least one Christmas holiday in their host country just to see what it's like. Stay with friends or family or whoever, like I did that back in Venezuela. I spent I spent a whole Christmas just staying there to see how they celebrate Christmas. And it's different in a Muslim country, but seeing how other countries celebrate during that time, even if they don't celebrate, So have you seen some of the lights that they put up around here? It's ridiculous. It's just really funny. Yeah. But there's a lot of lights up here on camp, right?
Yeah, there definitely is. But there's a lot of people too. Like when we put up lights, there's people who are Muslim who will stop by and ask to take pictures of our house and stuff like that because they love the lights. And we've been thanked for, hey, thanks for putting this up. This is really cool. And so it's just kind of a cool way to celebrate that. There's going to be one year, I think it would be super cool to live here, is that year that Ramadan, that the Eid that wraps up right around Christmas time. I think that would be a pretty marvelous party to be a part of in the Middle East, because you've got two, very influential, important religions celebrating right at the same time. I think that would be a really cool thing to experience.
I think that might be a time
if I'm not in the Middle East at that time, I will definitely be coming back to maybe be a part of that, because I think that would be cool. And just the fact that you can go out here now and you can find Christmas trees at the stores, Christmas lights, Christmas decorations. Obviously, you aren't going to find Jesus statues and stuff like that, but just the fact in the 9 years I've been here and how much that's changed and transformed. Yeah, it's just kind of cool. Or one of the huge things about staying here too is most of our camp clears out. So this place is like a ghost town, and all of a sudden you've got weather that's 72 degrees and sunny every day, and you live on the ocean. And so why would I want to go somewhere and freeze my butt off like Minnesota, and then when I could just be kind of hanging out in San Diego, playing golf every day, reading books, chilling out with my kids? That's pretty awesome, man. Because one of the things I wanted to do was go home, because the Minnesota Wild hosted the New Year's Day game at Target Field, which is the outdoor baseball field. I was really hoping to go to that, and it turned out that game was played in negative 16 degree Fahrenheit conditions. No, I would have been really upset had I flown home, probably got Rona or COVID, and then tried to go to the game also. Just wouldn't have happened. So I am so thankful I got to stay here. and have some fun with it. So it's all good.
Well, that's definitely a great staycation for you this year. You can mark on your calendar and as a memory, because all three of us had different kind of vacations this year. I went away on a trip for diving alone and hung out with different kinds of people on a dive ship. Kent went back to the States and saw friends and family, and he went to Las Vegas. And you had a staycation and actually saw more of our host country and got to spend time with your family and read. So that was three different kinds of vacations that we really experienced, because a lot of people they're on the first thing smoking, right? A lot of teachers just get on the first airplane they can, and they're gone, and they come back the very last day of vacation if they can.
And it was interesting the people who left and came back, because I think we were down maybe 8 or 9 staff members for the first few days of school at least. And then, I don't know if we can talk about, like, people obviously will get sick, because when you travel, people come back from all corners of the globe and they bring the bugs and the flus and the COVIDs with them. And that kind of had its run, and, nothing.
I'm glad you had a great vacation. I missed you. I'm glad you're back online here, man.
It's nice to be back. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening and following us along on this holiday adventure, I guess you want to say. You got to hear Ken's trip, you got to hear Greg's trip, you got to hear my trip. If you have any questions or concerns, complaints, you could send them to the International Teacher Podcast at gmail.com. You can also check us out on Instagram at ITP Expats. And we do check that regularly. We have a Twitter handle that we don't really Twitter much, so I don't know if you want to check us out there. And if you've got any episode ideas that you want to shoot our way, feel free. We'd love to hear your feedback. But enjoy, have a great day, and thanks for checking us out.
So this is Greg, the single guy, and Matt, the
family guy.
Checking out, and Kent the cat guy, all checking out till next episode. Thank you very much.
Take care, everybody.